I know that people think I have ill will towards the person who made this theory, but I do not. I just proved this when we were friends. Please just hear me out. Also, the art made by her, is used under fair use. The other artist, Rhino Bullrack, I got written permission from to use his artwork due to his different policies on art usage. Furthermore, all information here is based on the books up to Book 9, Talons of Power. I will not be using any information from events the author has been to or any blog posts. Everything will be book exclusive. Thank you. So a lot of people have thought about theories and ideas for different characters in the Wings of Fire world, like, who is this, or what is that, or what if blank is actually blank? Well, one of these theories stood out, and it's the Albatross Hybrid theory, created by Elizabeth Humison, also known as X the Dragon Reborn X. She states that the character Albatross in Animus, side note, Animus users were able to manipulate objects at will at the cost of their own sanity, was a hybrid instead of a purebred. She explains this by starting off with, a lot of people think Sea Wings were the first to have Animus magic, and I strongly disagree, and cites the book, which says, Albatross was the only Animus in the tribe, the only Animus any Sea Wing had ever known. Afterwards, she states that Albatross didn't look like normal Sea Wing, saying that Albatross is described as being very pale and with some white scales and dark eyes, then cites more of the book. His scales were bluish-gray, but so pale in places that they looked almost white, while his eyes were a blue so dark they were nearly black. She draws the conclusion that Albatross is a Sea Wing Ice Wing hybrid, saying that the features of Albatross described are very similar to that of an Ice Wings. Seems pretty cut and dry, right? However, I hate to say this theory is completely wrong. Let's go over the facts and investigate. First off, let's talk about why this theory doesn't hold together, and then I'll explain why the theory is wrong. First, she immediately goes off on a tangent, and instead of talking about how she thinks Albatross is a hybrid, she starts talking about why she thinks Sea Wings weren't the first tribe to have Animus magic. I can understand why she did this, but it doesn't really apply to the idea at hand. Secondly, conclusions are drawn very early from the start without taking a bit more time to try and understand the context of the words. Now, I understand that it's a book, and specific things can be taken in directions because of how a reader feels on the subject, but still this applies regardless. Take the first quote, for example. Albatross was the only Animus in the tribe, the only Animus any Sea Wing had ever known. She draws a conclusion immediately, thinking, well, because Albatross was the only Sea Wing known to have Animus powers, he must be a hybrid. More on that later. But for now, we have to face that she jumped to conclusions as soon as the starting gun was fired. Now, let's get into the real meat of this theory. Liz starts off by saying that Sea Wings weren't the first to have Animus magic, and says that Albatross was the first Sea Wing ever to have Animus magic. The quote is, Albatross was the only Animus in the tribe, the only Animus any Sea Wing had ever known. While Albatross could possibly be the first Sea Wing Animus, I believe that he was not. Since a lot of what-if statements are used, I will use one myself. What if there was an Animus before Albatross, but they just kept quiet about it? Or, what if someone had Animus powers but didn't know about it? There are many questions that surround this, so we can't really tell for sure, but it is unsafe to assume that Albatross was the first Sea Wing Animus. However, this begs the question, which tribe had Animus powers first? More on that later. Next, she quotes another line from the book. There were rumors that other tribes had them, but who could tell if that were true? Liz states that this was referring to Ice Wings, since they were proven to have Animus powers. However, Night Wings have powers also. And yes, they were shown to receive Animus powers from Ice Wings, but that's not the point. The point here is that any tribe could have Animus powers. There are no rules as to who specifically can have these powers. Sea Wings are an example of this. They could have just magically had them one day. But it's not magic. There is one thing that exists, even in the real world, that easily explains everything. Genetics. Genetics is the study of how traits are passed through generations. The likelihood that you and that special someone having a child with specific traits, such as brown or blue eyes, brown or blonde hair, etc., are all calculated through genetics. Does this look familiar to you? This is called a Punnett square. It is an extremely simple way to calculate the likelihood of a child receiving a specific set of traits. There are two types of traits, dominant and recessive. Dominant genes overtake recessive genes, and only one needs to be present to take over the recessive. Recessive genes only occur when there is no dominant gene. They are both symbolized with letters, dominant being symbolized with capital letters and recessive being symbolized with lowercase letters. I know it's a bit confusing, but take a look. Take brown eyes versus blue eyes. Brown eyes are much more common, so they are dominant. Let's symbolize them with a capital B. On the other hand, blue eyes are much rarer, so they are recessive. Let's symbolize them with a lowercase b. Does it make sense now? Here's an example of when recessive genes are there, but no recessive child is available. Notice how all the squares have an uppercase B, so all children will have brown eyes, but a blue recessive gene to boot. This blue recessive gene will not do anything. It will simply be there, but since there is a dominant gene there, the recessive gene will not take effect. Now let's assume one of these offspring has a child. Let's put them with a blue-eyed person. Notice how there is one blue-eyed child now in the bottom right. They have roughly a 25% chance to have a blue-eyed child. Do you see where I'm going with this? Hopefully you've caught on. If not, let's visualize it. Let's take brown and blue eyes and replace them with normal and animus. We'll symbolize them with D's. Let's arrange the letters like this in the case of Arctic and Fauxlayer. All of their children will be normal since there is no recessive exclusive Wait. Darkstalker is an animus, and his father is an animus. His mother is not, but he still is. Why? The answer is simple, and that answer is genetic mutations. Genetic mutations are rare and randomly occurring, and it's when a creature gains an ability or changes not normal, usually to adapt to a climate or to give them an advantage in some way. Here's some food for thought. Who was the first animus? Or more importantly, which tribe had animus magic first? Guess what? It doesn't matter. Why doesn't it matter? It's simple. The Scorching. The Scorching, in case you didn't know, was an event that occurred about 5,000 years before the events of the books. We don't exactly know what the Scorching is, but it is believed to be a time when dragons overthrew humans as the dominant race and established their own kingdoms. It's not unsafe to assume that the 7 tribes were either in their infancy or didn't exist at all. Since it is called the Scorching, ice, breath, venom, etc. should be ruled out at this time, because Scorching is usually associated with fire. There are 4 tribes capable of breathing fire: Nightwings, Sandwings, Mudwings under certain conditions, and Skywings. Notice, however, that neither Seawings nor Icewings are mentioned. They are probably, like the other tribes, were set into a specific climate, such as the ocean or Arctic regions, and adapted to those regions, such as how Icewings were now able to resist sub-zero temperatures, Seawings were now able to breathe and communicate underwater, and more. However, before all this, someone mutated animus magic and had a child. They are then separated, and it all goes from there. Now, the tribes have their own unique appearances, hierarchies, and abilities. Where does animus magic come into play? Well, this animus dragon has a child, this child has a child which has the gene, this child has a child who has the gene, this child has a child, and so on. Also, remember that the original animus may have another child that these 2 children or their offspring meet. Cross-tribe relationships are not unheard of, like Arctic and Fauxlayer and Stonemover and Thorn. Tell me, what's in common with these 2? Both of the males are animus. Could it be that males are more likely to have animus magic? I don't know, just a thought. But this does reveal something. Animus dragons are possibly rejected, or in some case accepted, by their tribes. It is human instinct that people fear what they don't understand. Because these dragons are so human-like, they will likely succumb to human instinct as well. In the beginning, these tribes may have rejected animus users, and they were forced to mate with members of other tribes, diversifying animus magic. We're really getting into speculation here, but I'm pretty sure it's obvious what I'm getting at. To summarize, who had animus power first does not matter. Genetic mutations and Punnett squares explain how Seawings and Icewings got their powers. Same with Darkstalker. One of Fauxlayer's ancestors must have been an animus in order for Darkstalker to be an animus. That took a long time. Moving on. The appearance of Albatross is then discussed, beginning with Liz saying that he was described as being very pale and with sunlight scales, followed with this quote, "His scales were bluish-gray but so pale that in places they looked almost white, while his eyes were a blue so dark they were nearly black." She then gives us a visual representation of how she imagines he looks. Is Albatross's appearance odd? Yes, but there's an easy explanation for this. Think of another animus that looks extremely odd for their tribe. That's right, it's Anemone. Anemone is an animus that's pink in some places and is very pale, which is not normal for an average seawing. Now let's look at Albatross. Bluish-gray scales, with some pale scales and dark blue eyes. Keep in mind that when people talk about colored eyes, they talk about the iris, or the colored part of the eye. There are two parts of the eye that we need to examine, the sclera and the iris. The iris, as previously mentioned, is the colored part of the eye here. The sclera is the white part of the eye, as shown here. Here's what the book describes Albatross's eyes as. And here is what Liz describes Albatross's eyes as. The difference is obvious, and this throws the theory out the window. This is a complete and total misinterpretation. She then goes and says, well, Albatross has pale scales and black eyes, so he must be part Icewing, right? Absolutely not. Look at Anemone. She looks extremely Icewing-like, but she isn't. Having pale scales is not anything strange. She then says Albatross has black eyes, but said earlier he had dark eyes. Dark and black are similar, yes, but they're not the same. He does not exhibit the same traits as Icewings. In conclusion, Albatross cannot be a hybrid because the theory does not hold together. Genetics proves he can have animus powers without the use of an Icewing, and the description of him was misinterpreted. If you got this far, congratulations. You made it to the end of the video. I had a lot of fun putting this together. I've been wanting to do this for over a year now, and I'm so glad I finally had the opportunity to do so. Please like the video if you enjoyed, and if you have any questions about anything I mentioned, or if I'm wrong in any way, please leave a comment. I will respond to all of them. Please subscribe if you haven't. I'll be releasing more edited videos soon. Also, make sure to hit that small bell icon for notifications when I go live on my YouTube channel and when I upload a new video. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.